Zara's hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the bathroom sink, mascara streaming down her cheeks in dark rivers. Through the door, she could hear him. His footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Getting closer. You have 5 minutes. His voice was ice. Cold. Controlled. Then I'm coming in whether you're ready or not. She pressed her palm against her mouth to muffle the sob that escaped. This wasn't how her life was supposed to go. 26 years old, and she'd just signed her body away to a man whose eyes held nothing but disdain every time he looked at her. The doorknob rattled. Zara. His accent made her name sound foreign. Wrong. Open. The door. She didn't move. Couldn't move. Her reflection stared back at her, a stranger in white silk, trembling like a leaf in a storm. The diamond choker around her neck felt like a collar. A leash. A reminder that she was bought and paid for. The door burst open. Jae-won Park stood in the doorway, 6 feet of cold fury wrapped in a designer suit. His jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. His dark eyes swept over her, from her tear-stained face to her bare feet, and something flickered in his gaze. Something she couldn't name. You've been crying, he said. Not a question. What did you expect? Her voice cracked. A happy bride? Champagne and rose petals? He stepped closer. She stepped back. Her spine hit the cold tile wall. I expected, he said slowly, each word measured, a woman who understood the terms of our agreement. I understood them. She lifted her chin, refusing to cower even as her heart threatened to beat out of her chest. I just didn't realize understanding them would make me feel like I was dying inside. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The bathroom felt too small. The air too thin. His cologne too overwhelming. Then Jae-won did something she never expected. He laughed. Not a warm laugh. Not a kind laugh. A bitter, hollow sound that bounced off the marble walls and made her skin crawl. You think you're dying inside? He loosened his tie with sharp, angry movements. You have no idea what dying inside feels like, Zara. No idea. Before she could respond, he turned and walked out of the bathroom. Walked out of the bedroom entirely. She heard the front door of the penthouse slam so hard the windows rattled. And just like that, she was alone. On her wedding night. With nothing but her tears and 1,000 unanswered questions. If you're watching this right now, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and tell me in the comments what time it is where you are and where you're watching from. I want to see how far this story reaches. And trust me, you're going to want to be subscribed for what happens next because this story, it's just getting started. Zara didn't know how long she stood in that bathroom. Minutes. Hours. Time had stopped meaning anything the moment her mother's voice had echoed through the phone 3 months ago. Baby, they're going to take everything. The house. The restaurant. Everything your grandmother built. I don't know what to do anymore. Her mother's sobs had broken something inside Zara. 40 years of building the most beloved soul food restaurant in Atlanta, and it was all going to disappear because of one bad investment. One trusted business partner who turned out to be nothing but a thief in an expensive suit. Marcus Webb had drained every account. Taken out loans in her mother's name. Left them drowning in debt so deep Zara couldn't see the surface anymore. $2.3 million. That was the price of her mother's trust. Her grandmother's legacy. Her own freedom. And then Jae-won Park had appeared like a dark angel with a proposition that made her stomach turn. I need a wife, he'd said, sitting across from her in his corner office, not a hint of emotion in his face. You need money. It's simple math. There's nothing simple about selling myself to a stranger. You're not selling yourself. He'd slid a contract across the desk. You're entering a business arrangement. 2 years. In exchange, I pay your family's debts in full, set up a trust for your mother's medical care, and provide you with a generous monthly allowance. And what do you get? His eyes had met hers then, and for just a moment, she'd seen something beneath the ice. Something wounded. Something angry. I get my inheritance. My father's will requires me to be married by my 30th birthday. That's in 3 months. If I'm not married by then, everything goes to my brother. He'd paused. I refuse to let that happen. So marry someone you actually like. I don't like anyone. The words had been so blunt, so matter-of-fact, that she'd almost laughed. Almost. What about expectations? She'd forced the words out, her cheeks burning. Physical expectations? I expect nothing from you except your presence at certain events, your signature on documents, and your discretion about our arrangement. His gaze had never wavered. I have no interest in forcing myself on an unwilling woman. Despite what you might think of me, I'm not a monster. She'd signed the contract that night. And now here she was, 3 months later, standing in the bathroom of his penthouse, wearing a wedding dress that cost more than her car, wondering if she'd made the biggest mistake of her life. Zara finally forced herself to move. She peeled off the wedding dress, letting it pool on the floor like a puddle of broken dreams. She found a robe in the closet, wrapped it around herself, and walked out into the penthouse. It was obscene, how much space one person could own. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago skyline. Everything was sleek, modern, cold. No photos on the walls. No personal touches. Just expensive furniture arranged with mathematical precision. She was pouring herself a glass of water when the front door opened. Jae-won walked in, and he looked different. His tie was gone. His jacket was gone. His shirt was untucked and his hair was disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it. But what really caught her attention was what he was carrying. A paper bag from a fast food restaurant. You haven't eaten, he said, setting the bag on the counter. The caterer told me you didn't touch anything at the reception. Zara stared at him like he'd grown a second head. You left. You slammed the door so hard I thought the building was going to collapse. And now you're back with, is that Popeyes? You mentioned in your questionnaire that it was your favorite. My questionnaire? The one my assistant sent. About your preferences. Food allergies. Things like that. He pulled out a box and set it in front of her. Spicy chicken sandwich. Extra pickles. You said it reminded you of home. Zara didn't know whether to laugh or cry. 20 minutes ago, she'd been convinced this man was going to make her life a living hell. And now he was standing in his probably $10,000 shirt, offering her a $5 chicken sandwich like it was the most normal thing in the world. Why? The word came out barely above a whisper. Jae-won's jaw tightened. Because you were crying. And I don't. He stopped. Started again. I don't know how to deal with tears. So I left. And then I realized that was probably the wrong thing to do. And then I drove around for 45 minutes trying to figure out what the right thing was. He pushed the bag closer to her. This was the best I could come up with. Something cracked in Zara's chest. A tiny fissure in the wall she'd built around her heart. You drove around for 45 minutes? I'm not good at this. His voice was tight. People. Emotions. Any of it. My father used to say I was born with a calculator instead of a heart. A bitter smile crossed his face. He wasn't wrong. Zara reached for the bag. Her fingers brushed his, and she felt him stiffen. Felt herself stiffen. Then the moment passed, and she was pulling out the sandwich, and the smell of spicy chicken and pickles filled the cold penthouse with something almost like warmth. Sit with me, she said. It wasn't a question. Wasn't exactly a command either. Something in between. An offering. Jae-won hesitated. Then he pulled out the bar stool next to hers and sat down. They didn't talk while she ate. But somehow, the silence felt different now. Less hostile. More like two strangers sitting in a bomb shelter, waiting to see if the world outside was still standing. When she finished, she wiped her hands and turned to face him. "Tell me something real," she said. "Something that's not in a contract or a questionnaire. Something true." His eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw uncertainty there. Vulnerability. It was gone in a flash, but she'd seen it. "My mother died when I was 12, he said. "And my father blamed me for it. Every day until the day he died." Zara's breath caught. "Why would he blame you?" "Because she was driving to pick me up from piano practice when the accident happened." His voice was flat. Empty. "If I hadn't insisted on taking lessons, if I hadn't called and asked her to come early because I was bored, she would have been home. Safe. Alive. That's not your fault. Tell that to my father." He laughed, that same hollow sound from before. "He told me every birthday, every Christmas, every time I achieved anything. Your mother should be here. But she's not. Because of you." Zara felt tears prick her eyes again, but this time, they weren't for herself. "That's abuse," she said softly. "That's not parenting. That's abuse. That's family." He shrugged. "Or at least, it was my family. My brother was the golden child. The one who could do no wrong. The one my father actually loved. And I was just the reminder of everything he'd lost. So that's why you need the inheritance. To prove something to a dead man." His eyes snapped to hers, sharp and wounded all at once. "I need the inheritance because I built that company. I worked 18-hour days for 10 years while my brother partied his way through 3 Ivy League schools without graduating from any of them. I earned it." His hands clenched on the counter. "And I refuse to let my father's hatred rob me of it even from the grave." Zara was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached out and did something that surprised them both. She put her hand over his. He froze. Stared at her hand like he'd never been touched before. Maybe he hadn't. Not like this. Not with kindness. "We're both broken," she said quietly. "Me with my family's debt. You with your father's ghost. Maybe that's why this happened. Two broken people trying to hold their pieces together long enough to survive." Jae-won didn't pull away. But he didn't speak either. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything neither of them knew how to say. Then, suddenly, he stood up. "Come with me." "What? Where?" "Somewhere that isn't here." He grabbed his keys from the counter. "This penthouse feels like a tomb. And I don't want to spend my wedding night in a tomb. It's almost midnight. I know a place that's open." Zara should have said no. Should have gone to bed in the guest room he'd prepared for her, maintained the professional distance their contract required. Instead, she found herself standing up. "Let me change first. There's clothes in the closet. My assistant picked out some things. She said she had to guess your size, so if anything doesn't fit, I'm sure it's fine." 20 minutes later, Zara was wearing jeans that fit like they'd been tailored for her and a sweater so soft she wanted to cry. And she was sitting in the passenger seat of Jae-won's car, driving through Chicago streets that glittered with rain. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Do you trust me? I married you. Trusting you is kind of implied." He glanced at her, and for the first time, she saw a real smile cross his face. Small. Barely there. But real. Fair point. They drove in silence for another 15 minutes. Then Jae-won pulled into a parking lot next to what looked like an old warehouse. The kind of building that could either be an art gallery or a murder scene. "If this is where you kill your wives," Zara said, "I want you to know I will haunt you forever. I've never had a wife before. He killed the engine. You're my first. Lucky me." He led her through a side door, down a narrow hallway lit with strings of fairy lights, and then they emerged into. She didn't have words at first. The warehouse had been transformed into something magical. A massive dance floor stretched out before them, empty except for a few couples moving slowly to music that came from speakers she couldn't see. The walls were covered in murals, explosions of color and movement that seemed to come alive in the dim light. "What is this place?" she whispered. "It belongs to a friend of mine. It's a jazz club on weekends, but on weeknights, it's just this." He gestured vaguely. "A place to exist without pretending." "You have friends?" He looked at her, eyebrow raised. "That surprises you?" "I mean..." She shrugged. "You don't exactly give off warm and fuzzy vibes." "Seo-jun has known me since we were 5. He's either extremely loyal or extremely masochistic." He paused. "Possibly both." A man appeared from behind the bar, arms wide, a grin splitting his face. He was Korean like Jae-won, but where Jae-won was all sharp angles and cold precision, this man was warmth and chaos personified. "Brother." He pulled Jae-won into a hug that made the other man stiffen. "You actually came. And you brought..." He turned to Zara, and his eyes went wide. "This is her? This is the wife?" "Seo-jun, this is Zara." "Zara, this is Seo-jun. Please ignore everything he's about to say." Too late. Seo-jun grabbed Zara's hand and kissed it with theatrical flair. "I've been trying to get this robot to feel something for years. And then he shows up with you, and suddenly he's bringing chicken sandwiches and driving through the rain at midnight. You're already performing miracles." Zara looked at Jae-won. "You told him about the chicken sandwich?" "I texted him. I needed advice." "You needed advice on how to comfort your wife, so you texted your friend?" "I told you. I don't know how to deal with emotions." Seo-jun was practically bouncing with glee. "This is the best night of my life. Better than my own wedding." Which, by the way, ended in divorce, so maybe that's not saying much. But still. He dragged them to a booth in the corner, brought over a bottle of something expensive, and proceeded to tell Zara every embarrassing story about Jae-won he could think of. She learned that Jae-won had once gotten so stressed about a presentation that he'd walked into the wrong building and presented to a completely different company. She learned that he'd memorized every line of his favorite movie but would deny even liking movies if anyone asked. She learned that when his father died, Jae-won hadn't cried at the funeral, but Seo-jun had found him the next day sitting in his car in an empty parking lot, unable to move. "He's not cold," Seo-jun said, suddenly serious. "He just doesn't know how to be any other way. His father taught him that emotions were weakness. That love was something other people had. He spent his whole life trying to unlearn that, but it's hard to unlearn something that's been beaten into you." Zara looked at Jae-won, who was staring at his drink like it held all the answers to the universe. "You don't have to talk about me like I'm not here," he said quietly. "I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the kid I used to know. The one who used to share his lunch with me because my parents couldn't afford to pack one." Seo-jun leaned forward. "That kid is still in there somewhere. I've seen him. He just needs someone to help him find his way out." The conversation paused there, and I'm going to pause too. Tell me in the comments, what do you think is going to happen next? Do you think Jae-won will open up more, or will something happen to push them apart? I'm reading every single comment. After Seo-jun left them alone, Jae-won stood up and held out his hand. "Dance with me." Zara blinked. "You dance?" "Badly. But there's no one here to judge." He paused. "Except you. But you're my wife, so you're contractually obligated to lie about my dancing skills." "I don't think that was in the contract." "It was implied." She took his hand. They moved to the center of the empty dance floor, where some old jazz song was playing through the speakers. Something slow and sad and beautiful all at once. Zara didn't know how to dance to jazz, and apparently neither did Jae-won, because they mostly just swayed. "I'm sorry," he said suddenly. "For what?" "For earlier. For slamming the door. For making you feel like you were alone." His hand tightened on her waist. This wasn't supposed to be like this. Like what? Complicated. He looked down at her, and his eyes were dark and deep and endless. You weren't supposed to be a real person. You were supposed to be a name on a contract. A solution to a problem. And then I saw you crying, and I realized. He trailed off. Realized what? That I didn't want you to cry. That I wanted to fix it. And I don't. He exhaled sharply. I don't want to fix things for people. I don't let myself care enough to want that. But with you, I wanted it anyway. Zara's heart was doing something strange. Something dangerous. Something that felt like hope. We've known each other for 3 months, she said. And for most of that time, you barely looked at me. I was looking. I was always looking. His voice dropped. I just didn't want you to know. Because if you knew, then it would be real. And I don't know how to do real. Maybe we can figure it out together. He didn't answer. But he pulled her closer, and they kept swaying, and the music kept playing, and somewhere in the space between one song and the next, something shifted. They stayed at the club until 4 a.m. Talking. Dancing. Sometimes just sitting in silence. Jae-won told her about his mother, the real memories, not the tragic ones. How she used to sing him Korean lullabies. How she taught him to make kimchi. How she called him her little star and promised he would shine brighter than anyone. Zara told him about her grandmother. About learning to cook in a kitchen that was always too hot and too crowded and perfect. About the first time she made cornbread from scratch and it came out like a brick, and her grandmother laughed so hard she cried. They walked along the Chicago River as the sun came up, and Zara's feet ached from the heels she'd refused to take off, and her legs burned from hours of swaying, and she was so exhausted she could barely think. But she was also something else. Something she hadn't been in a long time. Happy. When they finally got back to the penthouse, she collapsed on the couch, too tired to even make it to the bedroom. You can barely walk, Jae-won said, and there was something in his voice that might have been tenderness. Your fault. Who goes dancing until sunrise? Apparently we do. He disappeared for a moment, then came back with a blanket, which he draped over her. Sleep. We can figure out the rest later. She caught his hand before he could walk away. Stay. He hesitated. Not like that, she said quickly. Just, stay. Sit with me. I don't want to be alone. For a long moment, she thought he would say no. Would retreat back behind his walls. Would become the cold stranger from the contract again. But instead, he sat down on the edge of the couch. And then, slowly, carefully, like he was handling something precious and breakable, he lifted her feet into his lap. Sleep, he said again. She did. When Zara woke up, it was late afternoon, and Jae-won was gone. But there was a note on the coffee table, written in handwriting so precise it looked typed. Had to go to the office. Emergency with the acquisition. There's breakfast in the kitchen. And there's something else in the bedroom. I wasn't sure if it was too much, but Seo Jun said I should stop overthinking and just do it. So I did. Jae. Curious, Zara walked to the bedroom. On the bed was a dress. Simple. Black. Elegant. And next to it was a pair of shoes. Flats this time. And a note. For tonight. If you want. There's a gallery opening. My brother will be there. You don't have to come. But if you do, I wanted you to have something that didn't hurt your feet. Zara picked up the dress and held it against herself. It was perfect. He'd remembered her size from that first meeting, when she'd complained that designer sample sizes never fit her curves. He'd remembered. She was still standing there, holding the dress, when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered anyway. Hello? Is this Zara Mitchell? A woman's voice. Unfamiliar. Cold. Who's asking? My name is Jae-won Park. I'm Jae-won's sister-in-law. And we need to talk about your husband. Zara's blood ran cold. What about him? He didn't tell you, did he? The woman laughed, a cruel sound. Of course he didn't. He wouldn't want you to know. Not until it was too late. Know what? That you're not his first wife. The words hit Zara like a punch to the chest. His first wife died, Zara. She died, and the police never figured out how. And now you're living in the same penthouse where they found her body. The line went dead. Zara's hands were shaking. Her whole body was shaking. She looked around the penthouse, at the sleek furniture and the empty walls and the floor-to-ceiling windows. The same penthouse where they found her body. No. No, that couldn't be true. Jae-won had told her about his childhood, his mother, his father. He'd danced with her until sunrise. He'd bought her a chicken sandwich because she was crying. But he hadn't mentioned a first wife. Why hadn't he mentioned a first wife? The front door opened. Zara? Jae-won's voice. I came back early. I thought we could. He stopped when he saw her face. What happened? She took a step back. Then another. Who was she? Her voice didn't sound like her own. Your first wife. Who was she, and how did she die? The color drained from Jae-won's face. And in his eyes, Zara saw something that made her heart stop. Fear. If you want to find out what happens next, make sure you're subscribed to this channel because part 2 is coming, and trust me, you're not going to believe what Jae-won is hiding. Hit that bell so you don't miss it. I'll see you there.